Welcome, all of you, to this webinar on collective decisions, where we want to present some of the stuff that Catalina has done in her master thesis. So I hope you all join and see that. I think with the people who have joined now, I think it'll be good before we go to the next slide, perhaps to make a presentation, a round of presentations, to know who's actually joined. So I'll call out your name. Oh, before anything, you have to know that we're recording this. So I hope that's okay with all of you. Just need to be aware of that. And we'll make that available on our webpage later, so you can see if you want to revisit it or share it with your friends. But should we make like a short presentation round where you just explain, you know, I'll call out your name and you can tell me where you're calling from, and perhaps just a short information about who you are and why you're joining. That'll be great. So I can start with myself, Randi Christensen, currently sitting in Denmark, working in London, Oslo, Denmark, with lean and sustainability. And Paz.
Hello everyone, this is Paz Arroyo. I am with Collabdecisions and also in San Francisco, in the San Francisco Bay Area. I am working in quality and lean with DPR Construction, which is a general contractor. And I'm here because Catalina was my student in Chile. So very happy to be here.
Good. Thank you, Paz. Rivka?
Yeah, my name is Rivka. I'm calling in from Copenhagen, Denmark also. And I'm a master's student at DTU. For those of you who don't know, it's the Technical University of Denmark. And I'm studying material science, and I'm here because Catalina is my friend. I met her when I came to her university to do research 2 summers ago. Then, yeah. And I had read her paper before she submitted it for the conference, so I'm excited to see this presentation.
Brilliant. Welcome, Rivka.
Thank you.
Martin?
Hi, good morning. I don't know if my video is available. I'm calling from South San Jose, in South Bay Area. I'm working right now in the Santa Clara Water Valley District. I did my master in UC Berkeley, so I'm kind of familiar with the collaborative methodologies and concepts. So that's why I'm here.
Welcome. Barbara?
Hello, I'm Barbara. I'm a master's student from Brazil. My supervisors are Carlos Torres Formoso and Daniela Dittiana there. But actually I'm calling from UK because I'm here doing a case study for my master with Patricia Pertzopoulos. And my master is regarding visual management and digitalization. And that's it. Nice to meet you all.
Welcome, Barbara.
Thank you.
Annette has joined the call, but she's not actually calling in. She's helping us with some of the technologies. But then we have Ahmed. Are you there, Ahmed?
Yeah, hello, yes.
Hi there.
Okay, hello. I had some problem with my microphone, but yeah, no. Ahmed, I'm calling from Germany. I'm a friend of Annette. We studied together in Karlsruhe. And yeah, I'm also from Leavenworth, and it is interesting to know this interlinked and relation to sustainability. Nowadays, sustainability is one important value for every company, and not only value, it is also a target.
It's difficult to hear you, but welcome.
Okay.
I heard it was about sustainability and about calling in for Karlsruhe in Germany.
Yes, right.
Yes.
Right.
Welcome.
Thank
Tommy?
you.
Yeah, hello there, everybody. My name's Tommy Olsen. I'm a design manager for tunnels in Govi in Copenhagen, Denmark. I work with Randi on projects on using the various ideas that he brings. We work together on the Lower Thames Crossing in UK for the last 3-4 years.
Thank you. And Emna?
Hello, I hope you're all doing great. My name is Emna. I'm calling from France. I'm working with big construction as research and development engineer, and I'm working mainly on topics related to industrialization. And I'm here because during my PhD, I used chosen by advantages, and I met some of you in IGLC conference in Dublin. So it's nice to meet you again.
Nice to meet you, Emna. And the last person, Riaye, I'm not sure what your name is.
Hello, my name is also
Hello.
Annette. Hi.
Hi, Annette.
I'm calling from Austria, and I just randomly saw it on LinkedIn, and I like the topic. I'm looking into decision making for some weeks now. Yeah, I'm interested in the topic.
Welcome, Annette.
Thank you.
And then someone just joined. Is that Hoshio? Do I say the name correct?
Rocio.
Just connected, so there might be seconds. Okay, anyway, you can all join in and tap in as well in the discussion as we go along. Welcome to all of you, and I think it's quite amazing that we have so many people joining from all kinds of corners of the world. That's quite amazing by itself. Like I say, the webinar will be recorded, just for you to be aware of that. Could you jump to the next slide, please, Catalina? So today we want to just present Collabdecisions just very shortly to you, but the topic of today is Catalina Perez master thesis they'll be presenting, where we want to see how we can manage these decisions and how they link together and how we can use that in working with sustainability as well. So look very much forward to hearing that presentation, Catalina, you know that. You can always, it'll be good during the presentation if you mute your microphones. And if you have questions, feel free to put them on the chat as well. And then we can raise the questions as well. There'll be a Q&A session later, and we are not more people joining this call. Oh my God. Joining this call, then we can actually have a Q&A session at the end as well, where you can both raise the questions. Who's having a dog?
It's mine, sorry. I will.
That's the next guest.
Well, we're all working from home with all the challenges that gives. No, and then what's next, we will just shortly describe for you some of the things that will be coming up. But altogether, just fill in the discussion, write questions under the presentation, but after the presentation, we can join the discussion. Are you back, Catalina? And can you go to the next slide, please?
Yeah.
This is just to explain that, you know, Collabdecisions is funded by Paz, myself, and Annette, because we thought it would be great that we get a bit more, better, clearer decisions in the construction industry. And using choosing by advantages have proven across the globe actually to be a really good tool for doing that and bring more collective behavior to our industry and a bit more transparency as well, so we can see why we make certain decisions. If you go to the next, please. So our mission is that we just want to inspire all of you to make better and more collective decisions, so that we can have a more inclusive industry that actually embrace collaboration, so we can actually deliver much more value for our society and future generation. And I think actually that leads very well into the topic of sustainability. So Paz, I don't know if you have a few words now to introduce Catalina as well.
Yes, my pleasure. So Catalina Perez, she's graduated from Catholic University. She did her master thesis with me and other professor, and she really wanted to bring choosing by advantages to the next level. This is not a presentation that will explain choosing by advantages in detail, but it's going to explain how do you manage interrelated decisions. So Catalina was a very good student, very curious, and she wanted to move forward the knowledge. And she did an awesome job with international cases. So she's going to share one case of one city that wanted to design her waste management process and how they treated all interrelated decisions. And then she did an experiment, a control experiment in Chile with many other practitioners. So as you can see, she's very interested in sustainability and how these tools, choosing by advantages and design structure matrix, will help us make better decisions in the long run. So thank you so much, Catalina, and it's all yours now.
Okay, thank you, Paz. Hi, everyone. I'm Catalina Perez. And today I will be presenting this webinar titled Managing Interrelated Decisions in Relation to Sustainability. During this webinar, starting with a brief introduction about the decision-making related to sustainability. Then I'll present the hypothesis and objectives of the research, and then I'll explain how we apply CBA to make complex decisions, how we apply design structure matrix, that is a sequencing tool to manage the information creation process, how we apply it together to improve the design process. Finally, I expose the conclusion and contributions of this work. And it's the first question when we ask about developing sustainable project is, what is sustainability? Sustainability concerns the interaction, integrations, and significant relationships between global processes and economic, social, and environmental characteristics of particular sectors to try to develop solutions that have good impacts in these three aspects. Then the sustainable strategy aims to empower the social actors to make good decisions to improve welfare and public health while conserving or improving the environment itself. So in sustainable projects, the decisions made in early stages of the design process are the most critical because the impact, they determine the most of the impacts of the final project life cycle. However, making perfectly rational decisions, it's not feasible in practice because the complexity of the decisions and uncertainty of the process make difficult and make clear resolutions. This complexity arises from addressing different aspects of sustainability and multiple visions of the different stakeholders. And the uncertainty increases as the process progresses because we are continually creating information that is interrelated in the whole problem. So there's some design strategies that help to develop sustainable solutions, such as collaborative work and working with integrated design processes that help to manage these multiple stakeholder visions, and using some assessment tools from the beginning of the design process to base decisions on relevant facts and objective information. So since the design process can be seen as a series of decisions that have to address several aspects of sustainability and multiple stakeholders' visions, it seems reasonable to use a multi-criteria decision-making method to support the assessment process. Good decisions also need a clear evaluation to all the stakeholders and all the actors. All the decision-making can understand the evaluation of the different alternatives and requires an informative formulation to have all the important information to make this decision based in relevant facts. There exist some multi-criteria decision-making methods widely used in design processes, such as weighting, rating, and calculating, and the analytical hierarchy process. The methods that weight factors to select the final alternatives. However, when you weight factors, you couldn't understand what is the real impact of the different alternatives and the different choices. In contrast to those methods, choices by advantages, it's another multi-criteria decision-making method that provide transparency by giving relevant information and help to work collaboratively and make decisions collaboratively. So this method is a decision-making system that relies the decision in the comparisons of advantages among the alternatives. And it's perfect to make sustainable decisions related to sustainability because it separates the value from the cost on the decisions. That's perfect because we can assess other factors such as environmental, social factors properly in the same level than economic factors. It's been widely used in the AC industry to choose material, conceptual design, etc. And as a result, helped to reduce the conflict between stakeholders by facilitating consensus during the decision-making process, deliver value by reducing the uncertainty of the process, and help to document the decision rationale that could help to avoid rework in future decisions. However, it's only been used for moderately complex decisions because it cannot consider the interrelation of the factors, the criteria, and the decision in a complex problem. So for complex problem, managing the interrelation, managing the information creation process is the key to improve the performance and reduce wastes in the design process. Wastes in design are work or tasks that do not add value to the final process. And the most common are over or negative iteration, difficulties with managing the information because it's misinformation or growing information created in the process that leads to the team to constantly changes in the design that impact directly in the cost and the time of the design process. Some authors propose some strategies to avoid these wastes in design, that working with integrated teams to keep the information transfer low and to use tools that can represent iterative process and to work with feedbacks and not with tools that only mark a linear path and no iterative and iterative process such as the design process. So one of these tools is design structure matrix. There is a tool that aims to decompose a problem into tasks or activities or decision in this case. And they define and illustrate the interdependencies. And finally, reintegrate all the tasks in one single process. And the purpose of this method, this tool, is to document and understand the interrelation of the complex problems. And by reviewing these matrix, we can minimize iteration loops, maximize the availability of information, and minimize the size of the iteration loops. Here in this picture above shows building design process, and the axis represents the information that is interdependent between the tasks. For example, this task is dependent from the task 4, and that's it. And this one, the picture above shows the output of the DSM, where all the tasks are rearranged in a path that we could follow where all the information is available. So as a summary, sustainable problem must be addressed through a multi-criteria decision making to address the complexity and uncertainty levels. In this case, we choose using CBA because it's better than other methods to make sustainable decisions, but it's limited because it cannot consider the interrelation of the decisions. So this research had the purpose to establish multi-criteria decision making that are able to manage the interrelated of decisions of information in complex problems. So we believe that using CDA with DSM help to decrease negative iteration by reducing the uncertainty of the process, and help to increase the level of satisfaction, providing transparency and make the resolutions clear. So we want to establish some methods that can manage the interdependencies of the decisions. And the first stage of this research, we wanted to apply CDA for making complex decisions without any other tool, formal tool to manage the interrelation of decisions. So we use first a case study of redesigning a residential waste collection program, where 3 main decisions were made using CDA, where the decisions were defining a recycling program, defining an organics collection and treatment program, and defining a variable fee, most commonly known as pay as you throw. The scope of these decisions were also defining, I don't know, collection frequencies, the card size, the service providers. There's a lot of information in these 3 decisions that were interdependent between them because, for example, if you wanted to set collection frequencies for one program, it is related to the frequencies of the other program. So it was really difficult to understand and to select one alternative against another because all the information was really interrelated. In this case study, the interrelation of the decision were managed through decision trees that the design teams developed. And here, a lot of people, of the holders were involved in the process. Among them were the municipality, different specialties of the design team, and different specialties of service providers, and also the preference of the community were included in the values of the decisions through a community engagement that they made previously to make the decisions. So to assess this case study, we collected the levels of satisfaction or frustration of the decision maker during the design process. There's a CBA preference and negative iteration perceived by them during the process. Results show that the frustration in the design process were decreasing during the design process. It was a decrease of 70% in personal frustration and 75% decrease in the team frustration perceived by the practitioners. When we asked them about their preference of using CBA, for example, to get transparency and consensus, they preferred using CBA, but in terms of time, they were really worried because they spent much more time they were expected spent on finally defining the CBA before to make the decisions. But in general, in a global view, they still preference using CBA against other practices to make complex decisions. Finally, when we asked about if they perceive negative iteration, only 29% of the practitioners saw there were negative iteration, and they estimate there were a little impact on the time in the final process. But they were really concerned not about the time of negative iteration, but the time they spent defining the CDA, defining the factors, defining the information that was involved in all these CBA that were huge because there were 3 decisions, but was a lot of factors they had to assess. So the main causes of reworking here was because the factors and the information was really interrelated, so they couldn't move forward without constant rework. And the complexity of the decision, it's also important because it was increasing the amount of information as the process progressed. So they continually had to rework and review all this information to define the CBAs. So from here, we could see, we could apply CBA to make complex decisions for the first time, including different social and technical factors to design a public waste collection program. And CBA also allows us to include the population visions about the program to ensure the program will fit the community futures and work. And finally, we saw that the interrelations the variables have to be considered in complex decisions to avoid misinformation, avoid to rework constantly in the definition of the decision. So we propose using the science structure matrix, this sequencing tool, to manage the information creation process and avoid rework on defining the CVAs. We use the same case study when we try to make the same three main decisions, but now the interrelation were managed through the design structure matrix we developed. And in here we could decompose these three main decisions in 26 more approachable decisions with the help of one of the members of the design team. And after the decision, the design structure matrix was made, we could review and then restructure it with the design team in looking for value generation. So here's the DSM we developed, where the dots represent the dependencies of the decisions. We could decompose other factors that were conflicting factors in the case before. For example, collections, providers, collection frequencies, materials to accept in the different programs, etc. And here, the pictures on the left show the first output of the DSM, where it shows two main iteration loops with 3 and 5 decisions each. And we could review and tier some dependencies to decrease the size of the loops from 3 to 2 decisions and to 5 to 2, from 5 to 2 decisions. We did it by tiering some dependencies that we make some assumptions, and we could document these assumptions to move forward along a linear path. And we could put emphasis in these loops that are interrelated. And there is information of both decisions that had to be created before to make decisions. So we could put a special emphasis on solve these iterations and not the iterations that involve more decision and more information. So from here, applying the DSM, we could document the interdependencies and understand them in a fast and simple manner, and we could change it, and depends on the assumptions we want to make to move a linear path. We could manipulate high levels of complexity and uncertainty. In contrast to traditional tools as decision trees that the teams used before, we could document assumptions to move forward a linear path, and these assumptions keep well documented, so we could look it again if we wanted to change something, or if someone thinks that one assumption is bad, we can go and see it again and reintegrate again the design process. And finally, we could identify an order by not influencing this order by undocumented knowledge. But this is tricky because if we don't put all the dependencies in the matrix, there will be misinformation during the process. So special emphasis to put all the dependencies that are important in the process in this matrix. So to measure the impacts of using CVA and DSM to improve the design process, we developed a control experiment to analyze the impacts of using DSM to manage the interrelations of the decisions. In this control experiment simulated a net zero energy building design, where the design teams must make highly interrelated decisions to design the main features of this building. And for example, they had to choose the design of the skylight, the array of the photovoltaic panels, the height of the roof, etc. There were 8 highly interrelated decisions, where 3 decisions were the most important because they were directly related to the energy strategy of the building. In this experiment participated 15 AC practitioners, were arranged in 5 teams of 3 people each. And to measure the variables of this experiment, we want to measure the design changes, the time they spend doing no valuable work. And after the decision-making process ended, we asked them about their satisfaction with the process and its outcomes. And we analyzed the decision quality of their final designs. Oh, here was the experiment protocol, but I will explain it really quick.
That might be of me making a formatting mistake. Sorry about that, Catalina.
Yeah, don't worry. Don't worry. I will explain very quick. We arranged in five teams the practitioners, where two of them, the team 1 and 2, they had the DSM developed by us. We delivered them the DSM, and the other teams, 3, 4, and 5, they had an extra time to define the orders they wanted to make the decision according to their experience. There was no formal method to manage the interrelations, only first training session about CDA and their dependencies of the decisions, but nothing else. So again, teams 1 and 2 had the DSM delivered by us, and the teams 3, 4, and 5 had to define the order of the decisions they wanted to make. So the result shows of negative iteration that the teams that had the DSM used a lot less time doing not valuable work, and they have no iteration, no changes in design, no changes in the order of the decisions. They had all the information available when they needed to make decisions. The other 3 teams, and they spent a lot of time doing not valuable work. The team 4 was the only team that didn't complete the decision-making process. The team 3 and 5 did complete it, but they had 5 and 8 iterations. That wasn't a big impact in the experiment because they could solve all the problems in the same session, but in practice it's really different, because it's depends on the capacity of reaction and the coordination of the different specialties. It wasn't measured in this experiment. When we saw the satisfaction levels of the analysis group, they had the DSM. We saw that 88% of the practitioners were at least satisfied with the process and its outcomes, against only 56% of the control group were satisfied with the process, and only 44% of the control group were satisfied with the outcomes. We also saw that in the control group, there were people that were unsatisfied with the process and the outcomes. That is a characteristic that is not present in the analysis group. When we wanted to analyze the decision quality of their final designs, we chose these 3 decisions that were directly related to the energy strategy and related to the generation and consumption of the building. And we noticed that the team 1 and 2 that they had the DSM chose different alternatives. They designed different kinds of building, but both were feasible and both were net zero energy consumption and generation. When we saw the other groups, we saw the team 3 didn't develop a feasible solution. They didn't saw the interrelation between the PV array and the skyline. They were competing with the space on the roof. So they chose alternatives that weren't feasible together. The team 4 didn't finish didn't complete the decision-making process, so we couldn't analyze their final design. And finally, team 5 chose a feasible alternative, but didn't accomplish the net zero energy building criteria. So from here, we saw that the complexity of the decisions arise more from the interrelated informations that involve more than the number of alternatives or factors they must assess. The changes in design again didn't represent a big impact during the experiment because they had 6 minutes to have all the decision-making process. So they had to solve these conflicts in a fast way, but also because they were working collaboratively. Again, in practice, of course, every change has a huge impact in the process, time, and cost. Finally, we saw the availability of information is essential to make a good decision. We saw it because the team 1 and 2 that had all the information reached a feasible and sustainable solution. But also, it's really important their own visions and values. And we saw it that when they're both designing different buildings, but both were feasible and sustainable. So as conclusions and contribution to the AC industry, we saw that predict the performance of the project with all the information needed is essential to design solution with good final impact. When we can predict how the solution will work in operation, it's easier to make decisions that are feasible and sustainable during time. We also saw that avoiding negative iteration and rework during the decision-making process affect directly in the time and cost of the process. And finally, that improving the design team with these tools like in managing the interrelation of decisions will avoid different problems and follow with the stages of the project. For example, in the construction process, we saw that some alternatives are unfeasible, or we want to review why we choose that material or that, I don't know. And we can go to the document information that we had about the decision rationale and the assumptions we made. So the limitation of this study that were in the first part of this research in the waste collection program, we measured the variables only based on the perception of the practitioners. So we couldn't measure the negative iteration during the process. And also in the experiment, the negative iteration related to the fragmentation of the industries wasn't measured either. So future work should measure where the impacts are using DSM to fully understand the interdependencies of the whole process, and not only to follow a linear path of the process, because we wanted to generate more value by reviewing and working of the structure of the design process. So this is the presentation. Thank you so much for hearing.
Thank you so much, Catalina, for the presentation. And while all of you think about some of the questions you want to raise, I just wanted to comment on that. Having used Choosing by Advances myself in a couple of projects, I certainly get the point that one of the most difficult parts of making good decisions is to manage the interdependencies and how you use the assumptions of one decisions, and that feeds into the next decision. And then suddenly the first decision is perhaps changed and have an impact on a later decision. So that chaos that it sometimes becomes is very, very important that we find a way how to manage that. And with this research, you have shown us at least how it could be done by some of the design structure matrix. And I think that's really great. One question for me, though, is that setting up the design structure matrix, when we have that on certain projects, it looks easy in this presentation because it was some snapshots of some design structure matrices that has been done. But how do you experience working with these projects, that making these matrices? How was that? What was the challenges of making the matrices?
Yeah, it was really challenging because actually it wasn't that challenging, because before we wanted to start to applying CDA, the design team were researching about how to make, how to design this waste collection program. So they had a lot of information. And they had these decision trees that I think they spent like 2 or 3 weeks making it. So it was easier to make the design structure matrix with this decision tree already made by them. But during the establishing the decision, the design structure matrix, the design team noticed that where information was missing because they didn't notice in the decision tree. So in here in the design structure matrix helped to notice that there were some dependencies that was missing, and they had to include it into their analysis. So it was challenging, but I think it was really good and helpful for them to understand how are the interdependencies related and how it impacts to the other decisions. And actually was different to know how to restructure the design process. We could generate more value than trying to know how is the path we have to move forward, or understand well how dependencies impacts on other decisions.
So another comment on that, Catalina, if you could explain, they had, I mean, one of the biggest benefits of design structure matrix is, of course, you show what are the interrelations, and as you said, the data that's missing. So they also had a lot of assumptions on what was the order or the process they wanted to make the decisions, right? So after your analysis, you made them change a lot of the order in which they had assumed. So that, I think that's something that maybe wasn't, I mean, they never thought about that the order of the decisions will make such a big difference.
Yeah, they started to make the decisions. They develop an order to make the decisions with this decision tree, but the decisions were so complex and so general. They were, I don't know, defining a recycling program was huge, and they had 3 different alternatives to recycling programs against to have little decisions that you can make more alternatives and actually evaluate it in a best way, because you have less factors and you can have 3 alternatives, but less factors and criteria that is more clear to all the stakeholders. But actually, when we decompose the problem, they noticed that they could make the decisions better, because when we started to make the design structure matrix, they already made the decision of the recycling program. It was easier because they had a recycling program before. But they noticed that some of the decisions they made, they had to make change because they didn't notice some interrelation that they noticed when they start to establish the dependencies into the decision making, the design structure matrix, sorry.
Are there more questions?
Hello, I have some questions. It's Martin here.
Hi there.
Hello.
Hi, Catalina. It looks like in the defining stage of the project, as you said, there was too much spending time. Do you think that problem is related to the learning curve? So I'm thinking about maybe if those teens get more exposed to develop this CBA more time, or in the past many times, so they could be reducing this time. My second question is, it looks like the satisfaction percentage, it's higher than the outcome percentage. I don't really understand what is the meaning of the outcome. So I know that the satisfaction is the goal, the satisfaction of the customer or whoever. but what's the meaning of the outcome in your presentation? And thank you.
Yeah, okay. With relation with the time they expand, the team never applied CVA before. They didn't know it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was trying to first to understand. They had, I think, 3 or 4 workshops about CVA and how to use it. But actually, because to apply CVA first, they had this design team, so in different specialties. So they divided in these 3 huge CVAs with a lot of factors and alternatives, different alternatives and different factors. And they weren't worried about the time they spent reaching consensus. Actually, they told us it was really easy to get consensus with CVA, but they were worried about defining the CVA because the complexity of the decisions was a lot of information involved in these decisions, and they didn't know how to start, from where to start of the different conflicting factors. They didn't know how to approach this problem through CVA because they had some ideas to how to approach it, but with different alternatives and different factors, they were really worried about it. Finally, they committed and they were really grateful about and satisfied with the here I can show you. Here you can see the frustration levels. And here it's both at 5. It's the point from start to being satisfied again frustrated. We also see that before starting CVA, they were really frustrated. They were learning, filling out the CVA, and finally in the workshops they decided and they reached consensus. And after the workshops, we asked them about the satisfaction with the outcomes, and it was a really good satisfaction in here. But in here in the experiment, 88% of the practitioners that used the DSM were satisfied with the process and the outcomes. But the people that didn't use the DSM, first, they was satisfied with the process because it was really challenging for them to understand all the interdependencies, and they didn't know which information needed for each decisions before to make it. And I think they could notice that the decisions they choose, the alternative they choose, weren't good. So only 44% of them were satisfied with their final design. And we noticed that it was right because the final design were in the 3 groups were failed. Were unfeasible or not finished or wasn't sustainable. So and that's why I think they were really concerned about their outcomes. But the people that had that make all the decisions with all the information they needed, they were really satisfied about their outcomes and their process itself.
Just a comment on that one, Catalina, as well. I've seen that a couple of times as well, is using choose to my advantage. People can be frustrated just by the fact that some of their problems becomes transparent, meaning that suddenly they realize they're lacking information, whereas if you do design decisions in a kind of normal way, you might not be aware that you're lacking some information and you can make decisions, because it's not transparent. So sometimes using some of these lean tools and the transparency it brings to the process can by itself makes people more frustrated. So actually frustration might not be a way of also always assessing the success of these tools as well. I think it would be interesting also in the future to see more criteria on actually assessing success on these processes. Is there one more question, perhaps?
I have another comment on what you were just guys piggybacking again from the conversation. So in terms of frustration, another thing that was very interesting that I never thought about before Catalina did this research was in the first case when the design team was developing this waste management process. When we did the interview, we figured out they were also frustrated during the learning process. Like if you compare, I mean, they were very frustrated. So before they didn't know anything about CBA. They were just trying to make these decisions and just bumping their heads on the wall. Then they learned CBA. One of their leaders went to to a CBA workshop, but then the process of teaching everybody else on the team was very frustrating too. So even though there was one person that was fully convinced and understood it, and then they start to see the benefits when everybody bought in and they started to use it more regularly. But there's a learning curve, and that's for sure with any system, in a new system you want to implement.
Absolutely. A final comment?
Thank you so much, Catalina.
Yeah, thank you so much, Catalina. Can you jump to some of the final slides, please, Catalina? We'll just make a closure. Thank you. So, so some of the things that's happening next, and you can stay tuned on our webpage for that, is that depending on how it will happen, IGLC will happen again 2020, and we have papers to present there as well on some of the choosing by advantage and other methods within Lean that could be interesting for a lot of you perhaps to stay updated on. And we'd also like to hear from you guys what kind of topics you think will be relevant for future webinars perhaps, or you have perhaps cases you'd like to present, or you'd like to discuss something. That's also something we would like to hear from you. We will continue to add as well training material and videos to the webpage as well. And if you don't already know how to get in contact with us, if you jump to the next one, Catalina, thank you. You can always contact us via our webpage, collabdecisions.com, or just, of course, reply to an email of what we have sent out to you today. So all kind of feedback is always welcomed from that perspective. And before we end, I just want to hear if there's any more comments around the table. So anyone who has anything to add? If not, we will end now in time, and you have hopefully a pleasant day or evening or what time it is wherever you're sitting. I hope to see all of you again sometime soon. And good luck, Catalina, as well. Look forward to see how your work progresses in the future as well. Thank you.